Welcome everybody to another episode of Clean Tech Gig. I have the absolute pleasure to have today with me Mr. Mark Henderson, the Chief Investment Officer of Gridserve. Mark, thank you very much for accepting my invitation. As usual, we will be discussing about current issues in the industry. We will be discussing about investment opportunities, what is the investment outlook in the UK and in Europe, and also we will touch on very hot issues like the services, the O&M, the asset management, and even going into storage given Gridserve's background. So, Mark, just as a brief intro, could you just tell us a bit about Gridserve and about yourself and what you do in the company?
Of course, thank you. Gridserve is a relatively new sustainable energy company. We were formed out of a solar developer, but now we focus on three key areas: grid power, electric vehicle power charging, and remote power as well. We're based in the UK. We have some offices in the Far East, but our primary focus for development is in UK projects, where the projects are centered around energy storage at the heart of everything we do, using usually solar power as well, and obviously in the case of electric vehicle charging, using that as the offtake for our power systems. My background is I actually spent many years as a financier, financing renewable energy projects of really all sectors, but most recently obviously focusing on the solar sector and energy storage. And I joined Gridserve 2 years ago with the responsibility of raising funding for our projects.
What is the outlook of your portfolio currently?
The outlook is looking very good. We are just connecting our first projects at the moment in the UK, which are the first unsubsidised solar and storage projects in the UK. Over 60. Thank you. We're very proud of them, and we have a fantastic pipeline. So for the next over the next 3 to 5 years, we're planning to develop over 100 projects in the country, purely for electric vehicle charging. And we're planning to do, we expect over 500 megawatts of solar and storage projects as well. So it's looking forward to a very bright future.
Quite an undertaking. That leads extremely well to my next question, which is, I would love your opinion on the challenges you're facing on developing and building this kind of unsubsidized assets.
I think our first project was an overnight success with 2 years running up to it. The problem is really at the heart of it, what do you say about unsubsidized? So for all investors and lenders to the sector, they are used to having this very predictable revenue stream from FITs or ROCs or other kind of solar supported revenues. Without those, then they have to take a view on markets and market pricing. And that is we used to do a lot of these in the 1990s. We used to build large £100 million gas-fired projects without any offtake. That was no problem at all. But trying to wean people now into doing these other projects is very difficult. And that means that you have to find identifiable revenue streams which are certain, which are supportive of the debt that you're trying to put into the projects. So that's the first problem, finding the revenue and making it certain. After that, then what are you going to do with the projects? And in the old days, you could just have fixed solar panels and pretty dumb assets, if you like, just producing power. As soon as the sun came up, the sun came down, and that was there. Now you have to try and make the energy as efficient and as useful as possible. And that means using new technologies. And for, again, lenders and investors, as soon as they hear new, they hear unproven. Doesn't matter if it's new and proven, they just think it's unproven. And for any lender or investor, unproven technology is a huge risk. So the challenges are trying to make it understandable to them that these are actually proven technologies, they are reliable, but it's a different kind of revenue stream.
The expectations of the investors are what they are. I think we are one of the very few industries that we have such a perception on debt and risk, and that we have so pampered in a sense to being offered essentially a government guarantee bond.
And the thing is, they kind of go both ways, because I've also spoken to investors who've complained about the fact that their revenue is just so predictable. It's like, but you want the predictability. And I go, yes, but actually we want some upside as well. It's like, well, you can't have that if it's all, fixed revenue. So why not have some merchant power in the risk, uncontracted power, where you're taking some risk on power prices, but it gives you some chance for upside earnings as well. So which do you want here? If you want to have benefit and outperform your portfolio, then you have to take some risks which aren't contracted.
So a couple of main points that I see, again, is first of all, there's a big talk about corporate PPAs, which is a big talk. I haven't seen many. So first of all, do you structure mostly, or do you strive to structure corporate PPAs, or you feel more comfortable? You see the investors feel more comfortable with utility-based PPAs.
The first projects we're doing were actually originally structured around a corporate PPA. In this case, with Warrington Borough Council, so with a local authority, and they were very interesting because they wanted to do it firstly to have pure green energy. Also, it removed the risk of future prices because they could lock in their own prices, and they also wanted to have a benefit in terms of the revenues, and that benefit is translated in a saving on their power prices, which they're using that saving to actually provide extra resources into the community and helping some of the deprived areas of the Warrington Borough. So that's all good reasons for having them. But the trouble is, as you say, there's not many of them. And they come with their own problems as well. They can be great, but they're not a panacea, because it means that you are taking the risk on the corporate themselves and how they're going to perform over the next 20, 30 years. Now, if that's a big blue chip company, great, although we have seen some of them fail recently. So that if your whole project is reliant on that and they fail, or if it's a multilateral company, they actually may decide to shut up shop in the UK and go to another market. So even if they're the bluest of blue chips, will they be here in 20 or 30 years? So you are taking a risk on it. The other problem is that most of them want to do it, and if you are the procurement officer in that company, you want to be showing that you're making a saving every year, which is quite hard then if you're the person selling the power, because you're then having to sell it at a discount every year. Now, over time, you can say, well, it will make you all these savings over 20 years, but you may have to pay a bit more upfront. And that isn't a great story for a procurement officer to say, super, I've locked into renewable energy and I'm paying more this year. So having to always have that discount isn't always good for the revenues of the project itself.
And everybody's discussing about, long-term PPAs over like 10, 15 years. My personal opinion is that even if you have such contracts, during the lifetime of that contract, you will be forced to negotiate with the counterparty at least 2 or 3 times. I cannot see these contracts remain the same, especially if you have huge fluctuations in price. And if the prediction is, perhaps that the price will go up. What happens if the price goes down? I mean, do you see clauses in these kind of contracts that somehow they balance the equation, or introduce a secondary level of renegotiation, i.e. risk?
Well, that's right. It certainly is introducing elements of legal risk, isn't it? So you've got your technical risks, you've got your economic risks, and now you have a legal risk. Because you're quite right. If the project is fundamentally out of the market and it's not commercial, people will seek to renegotiate it. Now, the way they're structured, there is no room to do that unless there is some major change, a force majeure change or something like that. But just losing money isn't a reason for doing it. So you're quite right. There will be a need to renegotiate it, and that puts you in a very difficult situation, because you have to have goodwill on both sides to sit down. And of course, the person who's losing money one day, well, in a future day, as you say, over 10 or 15 years, they'll be making money. So what happens then? Again, the person saying, well, I helped you out when it was bad then, now you've got to help me out this time. And that involves quite a lot of goodwill and practicality, which sadly a lot of the larger corporates may not be willing to share.
So moving on a very kind of sensitive, if you would like, point is that we see that the actual services, both the O&M and the asset management services, will have to evolve as we move into an unsubsidized PPA-driven environment. So one of the questions that people are constantly asking me, or we've been participating in a few conferences, and this kind of thing always pops up, is that the demands on both the O&Ms, on the response time, on how they treat the assets, how they, what kind of advice they will have to give on the trading side of the energy, it will be much more demanding. So the big question I have is, are the investors, the owners, willing to pay for it? Because up until now, we've seen prices driven down and down and down. And even now, as we speak, we have some of the major companies in the UK that they have serious cash flows issues, especially on the services side. So we see a downward trend, and we need to put some sort of we need to set the bottom, the base, the floor, the baseline. So it's a bit of a... What is your opinion?
Well, it's a tricky one. Obviously, as an asset owner, we like to see prices go down. But it is true that, if you pay peanuts, you can get monkeys. Do you want to have a sophisticated, very active or responsive partner? And it should be seen as a partnership. And so trying to get the cheapest price isn't a good basis for a partnership. But what you do want to see is reaction, innovation, and creativity. On the reaction time, I've seen companies who have a portfolio of assets which they outsource completely to a third-party provider such as Greensolver, but they still need to have a team inside. There's an old Latin phrase which translates roughly into "who watches the watchman." You've got to have your own people looking after them, saying, okay, it may say in your contract you have this amount of response time, but actually the sun's shining, my solar panel's not working, I need somebody out there now doing it. Forget what's in the contract about you've got a 3-hour response time, I want them out there now. So you have to have people overlooking that, managing it, and working closely with you. And I think that the more you can provide, it's a bit of a cliche expression, added value, the better, because we are developing assets, we're building them, we're owning them, we're operating them. We're not actually necessarily experts in foreseeing how the next wave of assets should be managed. And so I think where you can distinguish yourselves in the O&M field is by providing solutions to problems we haven't even thought of. So being able to use new technology in order to see where panels aren't performing as they should do, being able to anticipate then that I need to go out and start replacing these early on, having portfolio advantages as well through being able to optimize better ways of selling them and maximizing revenues to the market itself. And we can do all this, but more somebody can come along and say, well, actually, we've done this on 3 other sites, 30 other sites. Here's what we've learned. We can benefit from that. And that is something which people should be prepared to pay a premium for.
Being on the services side for the last 3-4 years, what I hear is pretty much dollar signs. It's cost.
Well, yeah.
The reality is that we have to accept the fact that the services need to evolve as the industry evolves, and we need to definitely see where and how we can add value.
Well, that's right, because the dollar signs work both ways, don't they? It's not just what you're saving, it's actually what you're generating as well.
Exactly.
And I'm happy to share upside with people. If they can be saying, well, we can actually get this much more revenue out of a project from working it better, working more efficiently, bringing new technology to bear, I'm happy to share that with people rather than just saving money as well.
So what you're saying is that we, service providers and asset owners, need to sit down together and perhaps create new business models where there is a share on the cost but a share on the upside as well. Because we accept, I think, the responsibility that we should be investing on innovation, investing in new tools and new technologies as service providers. But on the other hand, I think that we need, to go hand to hand with the asset owners.
Well, absolutely.
To make sure that what we do and the direction we put forward is exactly what the asset owners want.
Well, that's right. You need to be incentivized to invest in this innovation. And if you're just investing in it and people just wanting to charge less for it, it may be a nicer service, but it doesn't give you the incentive to invest in it. So I think that there should be, and I haven't seen these models, but I think these models that should be explored is actually saying, right, if you can provide this service and show the benefits and not just the revenue benefits, but other cost savings, environmental ones, whatever they are, then we should be prepared to share in that benefit with you and allow you to therefore invest in it further.
I'm glad that we see eye to eye on that. So part of this kind of new perhaps a revolution or new ways of doing things is that we need to start taking information-based decision. So data, they sit at the heart of everything we do. And up until now, data and monitoring and whatever we're doing on the sites, we have terabytes and terabytes of data, but they were mainly used as a box-ticking exercise to create reports for the lenders or for the stakeholders in a project. How do you think that now this kind of new data approach that we have, again, lots of people talking about it, I haven't seen many taking specific actions on it. But how is this, changing, if you would like, the industry?
Well, it comes back to giving confidence in new technology, and I think it probably can be shared more widely. So, for example, our first projects, which we're commissioning at the moment, they are the first projects in the UK with using bifacial panels, and they're the first ones using tracking systems, and they're also the first using both bifacial and tracking. And in trying to sell that to investors and lenders, it was very difficult because they got the fact that these are proven technologies, but they had no idea, for example, what extra generation can come from a bifacial panel. Certain amount is warranted. There's a warranty curve we get from the panel manufacturers, but we're saying we think it's going to be 30% extra generation. We don't have any proof on that. So on a really basic level, just being able to share the fact that here's some bifacial, this is what they're producing, this is the deviation from the mean that they're producing. That will help us in future projects, but it'll also help the industry as a whole if people can share this more generally and saying, yes, in the UK, bifacial works, it is more efficient, it's more cost efficient as well. And these are the kinds of extra generation benefits you can be getting from it.
That's a very brave decision for the UK to go for trackers and bifacials.
It is. We believe in being bold.
It's a very brave decision. I would have considered this in Southern Europe perhaps, but
well, that's why people always think because you have to be a sunny country, and I think this is actually one of the disadvantages of a subsidy system we had, that people didn't get rewarded really for producing this extra generation, and so in the unsubsidized world, we have to find ways of being more creative, and tracking not only, for example, produces more energy, it actually on the curve you make, it creates more energy at a better part of the electricity curve as well. So the price peaks you get in the morning and the evening, you can now capture those rather than just previously when solar generation on a fixed basis just captured the prices in the middle of the day. So yes, it's doing tracking bifacial, and I forgot to mention the first project also has battery storage as well.
Okay, so it's a co-located.
It's a co-located size, absolutely.
And what is the percentage that you have? What's the battery capacity?
It's a 27 megawatt battery capacity on a 35 megawatt site. So it can really shift quite considerable amounts of load, it can shift the time, but it also is very useful time shifting as well between the electricity peaks. So we've had days in the UK, believe it or not, when it's actually so sunny in the middle of the day that prices have gone negative. And how that, if you've got a battery, is free electricity. In fact, you're being paid to take the electricity. So that is great. So you can top up your battery at a time of negative pricing, being paid for it, and shift that then to the end of the day, sun's gone down and power prices have gone up, and leave it.
So refocusing on the data issue, how do you think that the data will start empowering yourselves as owners to take more informative decision, both on the revenue side but also on the cost side?
Well, it'll help on how you technically specify the projects. So I was mentioning batteries, but we've picked a battery which we believe is efficient for the size of the solar panels we have, but we can't prove it. So data will help us say, well, actually, maybe we don't need this size of battery. Maybe it's a different size of battery you need. Also, in terms of how you configure the solar farms themselves, because previously we've been working on the production on the AC basis, but actually we can produce much more on a DC basis, and decide that we don't actually generate and evacuate all of that to the grid at the same time. So it also then provides information which we can feed into the grid about how we can serve the grid better and actually allow the frequency and the stabilization to be more efficient. So that's one thing. So there's a technical specification, and of course, as soon as you look at making that more efficient, then that flows through to the revenues as well. But when you can be generating, if you've got the advantage of having batteries, when you generate, when you dispatch, and when you top it up. So data will hugely inform what is actually, at the moment, a rather crude and dumb production profile. When the sun comes up, we generate. But actually, that's not going to be the way going forward, I predict. We're going to have an electricity system in the UK which is designed to be zero carbon. We can't do that on intermittent energy without having a more efficient way of regulating that flow of energy.
What do you think would be, the favorite, if you would like, policies that you would like, as we have the elections now, the new government's bringing in? I'm not saying about, introducing another round of subsidies, perhaps. Perhaps that's taking it too far, some may say. But what would be, what are the barriers that you had to go through, especially now on an unsubsidized projects? We're talking about larger projects. We're talking about, connecting to 132 kV. So you're talking about 30, 35 megawatt projects plus. So what are the barriers that you had to go through on the policy side?
I think the first thing on the policy side is not to go back to subsidies. Now that's a radical thing.
That's a very good. That's a very good opinion.
I'll lose a lot of friends in the industry, but subsidies are nice. Goodness me, I'll take them every day if they're there. But actually, being subsidy free is better, because the trouble with subsidies is that they can change, and politicians can change them. And who wants the economic life of your project in the hands of a politician? Exactly.
Distort the market.
Exactly. It is a market distortion, and it will change. If like we were saying about corporate PPAs, if they're uneconomic, then they will be renegotiated. If subsidies distort the market, they will change. So whilst they are nice for starting up an industry, and they were very effective at doing that, then in the longer term, you want to be subsidy free. So that's the first point, no more subsidies. But that has to be applied equally across the market. And so for the oil and gas industry, for example, who have a lot of tax benefits, those should be removed as well. So first thing is absolutely a level playing field for all energy sources. The second one is perhaps slightly controversial, may look like I'm contradicting myself, but do we actually promote a carbon price? So we want to have a zero carbon economy. Is that, do we actually reward people for having carbon-free generation rather than generation which is actually using fossil fuels and creating carbon sources?
So you're talking about trading rights?
Trading rights, exactly. So at the moment, you can have the REGOs, the renewable energy generation, which specifies that your electricity you're buying is from a green source. But the trouble is, those can be sold separately. So you can sell the power to one person, and there are some companies out there who are supplying power to people, which they're saying is green, only because they've got a certificate. And that's not really green as far as I'm concerned. So I think if you are going to reward people for having green sources, then that should go with the power. And so people who are having brown power, in other words, dirty power, which is not coming from sustainable sources, that should be very clear and obvious to the consumers as well. And I think that doesn't have to have a financial reward. It can just be as clear as this is green power, this is brown. And I think if you look at all the climate Extinction Rebellion and all the climate moves in the UK, people know that their power is coming from a brown source, and they have to stand up to their shareholders and stakeholders and customers and saying, we've got green power or we've got brown power. That alone will make a shift in people's thinking, and that alone will make people say, I'm not paying for that, or I will pay for this. And that will actually then create its own market. And I think it will very quickly start to having a correction in the market, and we'll go, I don't want to have that power. And that will create suddenly a demand, more of a demand for green power. And that should come with a premium. Supply and demand, you know all about the
Yes, yes. I want to touch on the elephant in the room, as I say. I want to go to the big question, to the Brexit question. So you have lots and lots of investment plan in the UK, but did you see? I guess you have some sort of a contingency plan in place, as does everybody else that invests currently in the UK. But how do you see Brexit perhaps having an impact on your future plans, either on import prices or keep prices?
Well, we're lucky in terms of the actual power generation that we're an island, and so therefore we can generate our own demand. The problem is when we're constructing and building projects. And in fact, I was asked this question by some lenders and investors when we were building our first projects. They said, where are you buying your equipment from? Is it going to be China, US, or Europe? Now, a few years ago, people would not have been so keen on buying from China for various reasons. And our particular bifacial panels are all coming from China. They're the main manufacturers, you know. And so we confessed to the lenders that actually it's going to be not coming from Europe. And went, thank goodness for that. That is their first reaction, because they're not sure what's going to happen to prices. They're not sure what's going to happen to taxes and tariffs. And also, as simple as, will it get through the borders? Will it just be held up at the border lines because of new customs restrictions or problems? So if you're working to a tight deadline, which most projects are, then you want to know your equipment's going to be provided on time and there's not going to be any surprises in tariffs or levies. And if you're buying stuff from Europe at the moment, people are worried about that.
A very, very valid question. The follow-up question on that would be, given that the financial and the trading tensions between the Western world and China, what is the flip side? I mean, we already have, people saying, we don't want to buy from perhaps Chinese manufacturers because we don't know what will happen or what kind of measures will be imposed on the trading side. So there's always a trade-off, isn't it?
There is. It's like damned if you do, damned if you don't, isn't it? Which is better. What is it? Is there an easy solution to it? There isn't an easy one. I mean, just from a practical basis, we are spending a lot more time working with our relationships with people in the supply chain, both in China and other countries as well, to make sure that they can be relied upon, the delivery can be relied upon, prices won't change, delivery times can be kept to. And that's not easy, and that's taking up a lot of our time. There's a cost which goes to that, not just our own time cost, but a physical cost of working with these relationships. And that does make projects perhaps longer to deliver, which means they cost more as well. So it is not helping. The knock-on effects of Brexit means that things are taking longer and are becoming more expensive. And we haven't even gone through the whole Brexit
through
scenario.
The whole process again, which I think is going to take much longer than people anticipate.
I absolutely agree. Absolutely,
it's going to take years and years and years to sort things out.
No one knows. Even the Brexiteers in our government don't really know what's going to happen. And That's always a problem for any investment area. So we are looking for investors, both equity and debt investors for our projects, and they hate uncertainty. Even if it's not a good answer, even if it's like, well, we are certain and it's not good, it's going to cost more, at least you can plan around that. But not knowing what the answer is does mean that debt costs more, equity costs more, and it takes longer to achieve. So that's in no one's interest.
I want to finish this this discussion off on a more positive basis, Mark. I don't want to leave Brexit hanging in there at the end. So tell us about your aspirations and expectations over the 10 years that we're going to go into the 2020s now. We have 10 years in front of us, very ambitious targets for 2030. We have the climate emergency that well, we have deniers, but I guess that people that they research a bit more, they are aware of the situation. So there is a challenge for the industry as well to pick things up and move forward. I think we are the good guys. That's what I want to think. We can make money while saving the planet, and that's what's better than that.
Absolutely.
So give us a bit of a positivity there. Give us your outlook.
Well, it's looking forward 10, 20 years. I actually started in renewable energy about 20 years ago, and it was just a fringe, small niche area. I had no idea it would grow to the level it has. And I'm delighted to say that I think there's absolutely no holds barred on it going much further still and being potentially 100% of our electricity supply. And one of the big changes in that is energy storage, because that allows always intermittent energy to suddenly be managed properly across a grid system. And I think there is a real desire for people to see a carbon neutral energy supply. It means it can be self-producing as well, so we don't have to rely on imports from overseas, and it can be cost effective as well. As we know, once you've actually built for example, a solar park or a wind park, the actual cost of production is almost minimal, because it doesn't cost anything for the sun to come up in the morning, and it doesn't cost anything for those panels to be producing. Obviously, there are O&M costs and efficiencies, but generally it means it can push prices down, so suddenly you are self-sufficient, you are cheap, and you are clean as well. So I really think that people will be talking in probably even 10 years' time about what we used to burn coal to generate our power. What crazy idea was that? These are finite resources. They're now proven to be climate damaging resources as well. Who thought that was a good idea? But so the mindset shift has changed enormously, and so I think over 20 years we'll see how we can actually be 100% carbon neutral.
And on that positive note, thank you very much.
Thank you.